Picture this. A church filled with police officers, their badges gleaming under black mourning bands. My brother Gideon's casket sits at the front, draped in an American flag. I'm standing in the back row, where my father, Vernon, placed me. His voice is low, sharp, cutting through the solemn air. You're just a dispatcher, Sienna. Stay out of the way. This is about Gideon, our hero. I nod, silent, the weight of my FBI badge burning in my pocket. 8 years I've hidden who I really am. Then, the church doors swing open. 3 men in dark suits stride in, their eyes finding me. One calls out, clear and urgent. Agent Reid, we need you now. The room freezes. My father's face twists in shock. For 8 years, I carried a secret that changed everything. This is the moment it all unraveled. I'm Sienna Reid, 35 years old, raised in Eldridge, Pennsylvania, where the Reid name meant one thing: police work. My grandfather Harlan patrolled these streets in 1952, his boots echoing through a small town that revered him. My father, Vernon, followed, rising to deputy chief by the time I was in high school. My brother, Gideon, 4 years my senior, was their pride, born to wear the badge. From the moment he could walk, he clutched toy police cars, dreaming of the day he'd join them. Me, I was different. I loved the puzzle of crime, the patterns hidden in chaos. But in our family, that wasn't enough. Reid's run toward danger, Dad would say, his badge gleaming on the dinner table. To him, my books, my questions, were a detour from the real work of policing. I was 9 when I first felt his dismissal. Mikey gets to ride in the patrol car, I'd complain. He's going to be an officer, Dad replied, not looking up. You don't have the temperament, Sienna. Those words stung, but they lit a fire. I pored over his case files, spotting details even his detectives missed. Once our neighbor, Detective Martinez, noticed. She's got a good eye. Dad just shrugged. Book smarts. Real police work happens on the streets. My mother, Lenora, a nurse who'd seen the cost of danger, tried to soften his words. He just wants you safe. But safe wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to matter. At Georgetown, I studied forensic psychology, chasing a dream Dad couldn't see. He toasted Gideon's police academy acceptance, barely mentioning my scholarship. After graduation, I took a dispatcher job to keep the peace at home. But behind the scenes, I was building something bigger, something no one in Eldridge could have imagined. My family thought I answered phones. They didn't know I was an FBI agent, hunting the same cartel that would take Gideon's life. If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated by the people who should know you best, you're not alone. For 8 years, I stood in the shadow of my family's expectations, my true work hidden behind a lie. My father saw me as just a dispatcher, my brother as his little sister who'd never measure up to the Reid legacy. But at Gideon's memorial, when the truth came crashing through, I learned something. Our worth isn't defined by what others see. It's in the impact we make, the battles we fight, even when no one notices. Have you ever been misjudged? Maybe your family didn't see your passion, your career, your strength. Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Your words might inspire someone else to step into their truth. If this story moves you, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share it with others who need to hear it. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the rest of my journey. How I became an FBI agent, how Gideon's final gift changed our family, and how we're healing through his loss. Share this video with someone who's felt unseen, someone who needs to know their work matters. I used Grok, created by XAI, to help organize the story. It's a tool that helps bring clarity to complex narratives, and it's part of why I can share this with you today. Check it out at XAI's website, link in the description. Let's keep this conversation going. Where are you watching from? What's your story of being underestimated? Comment below, and let's honor the strength it takes to be seen for who we truly are. In Eldridge, Pennsylvania, the Reid name was more than a family, it was a badge, a legacy carved in blue and brass. My grandfather, Harlan Reid, walked these streets in 1952, his patrol car a fixture in a town that saw him as its guardian. For 37 years, he answered calls in the dead of night, broke up bar fights, and chased down leads through snow and rain. He was the first Reid to wear the uniform, and in our small corner of the world, his name carried weight. My father, Vernon, picked up that mantle with pride. By the time I was born, he'd already made detective, his sharp eyes scanning crime scenes while his badge gleamed like a family heirloom. By my high school years, he was deputy chief, a man whose presence filled a room before he spoke. His voice, steady and commanding, set the tone at every family dinner. Reids run toward danger while others run away. My brother, Gideon, 4 years older, soaked up every word. From the moment he could toddle, he clutched toy police cars, their sirens echoing through our house. In 2nd grade, he wore Dad's old uniform shirt to career day, the sleeves dangling past his knees, his grin wide enough to light up Eldridge. By high school, he was in the Police Explorers program, memorizing protocols while his friends played video games. Gideon wasn't just my brother. He was my protector, my confidant, the one who translated Dad's cryptic expectations when they left me lost. He was the heir to the Reid legacy, the son destined to carry the badge. Dad saw himself in Gideon, and every story he told, every lesson he preached, was about that sacred calling, service, sacrifice, the front lines. In our family, the badge wasn't just metal, it was blood, binding us to a tradition that felt as old as the town itself. I grew up in its shadow, watching Gideon shine in its light, knowing I'd have to find my place in a world that revered the uniform above all else. But I wasn't like Gideon. Where he craved the rush of the streets, I was drawn to the quiet puzzle of crime. I'd sneak glances at Dad's case files when he left them on the dining room table, my eyes tracing patterns in stolen car reports or burglary timelines. I saw connections where others saw chaos, stories in the details that nobody else noticed. At 9, I begged to ride along in the patrol car like Gideon. "He's going to be an officer someday," Dad would say, not looking up from his notes. "You're too quiet, Sienna, too bookish. Girls can be officers, sure, but you don't have the temperament for real police work." His words cut deep, planting a seed of doubt I carried for years. I wasn't loud, wasn't bold, wasn't the Reid he wanted. Our neighbor, Detective Martinez, saw something else. One evening, I pointed out a detail in a case photo, a tire track pattern Dad's team had missed. Martinez nodded, impressed. "She's got a good eye, Vernon," he said. Dad's response was a dismissive grunt. Book smarts. Real police work happens on the streets. That phrase became his mantra, the yardstick by which he measured worth. My mother, Lenora, tried to bridge the gap. A nurse who'd met Dad when patching up a suspect. She understood both worlds, the adrenaline of emergencies and the steady work of analysis. "Your father just wants you safe," she'd say after another argument about my future. But safety felt like a cage when all I wanted was to prove I belonged. I loved Gideon fiercely, and he never made me feel less. "They don't get it, Sienna," he'd say, his eyes warm with belief. "You're going to outrank us all someday." His faith kept me going, even when Dad's words made me question my place in our family's legacy. That doubt fueled a quiet defiance. At 10, I'd sneak into Dad's study after he'd gone to bed, the glow of his desk lamp casting shadows over case files. One night, I pieced together a string of burglaries, noticing the thief always struck on moonless nights near the old mill. My heart raced as I scribbled notes, feeling like I'd cracked a code. When Dad caught me, his face hardened. "Analysis isn't policing, Sienna," he said, snatching the files. "Stick to something safe." I wanted to scream that I was just as much a Reid as Gideon, but his disapproval silenced me. Mom stepped in, her voice soft but firm. "She's curious, Vernon. Let her be." Her words gave me courage, but not enough to challenge him outright. I buried my dreams, promising myself I'd find a way to prove him wrong. By 15, those dreams took shape. Gideon and I would sit on our porch, debating criminal justice reform over lemonade. He'd argue for tougher arrests. I'd push for community policing, pointing out how trust could prevent crime before it started. "You think like a professor," he'd tease, but his smile showed respect. Those talks sharpened my mind, showing me I could hold my own. One night, I found a case file Dad left out, a string of vandalism cases. I mapped the incidents, spotting a pattern tied to a local gang's territory. I left my notes on his desk, hoping he'd notice. The next day, Martinez mentioned they'd made an arrest based on a hunch that sounded awfully like my map. Dad said nothing, but I felt a spark of victory. "You're going to do something big," Gideon whispered later, his eyes gleaming. "Just don't forget me when you're running the show." Those moments planted a seed. I wasn't chasing Dad's badge or Gideon's path. I wanted to solve crimes in my own way, with my mind, not just my courage. At 16, I decided I'd study forensic psychology, not to wear a uniform, but to understand the why behind the crime. Dad scoffed when I told him, "Fancy degrees don't catch criminals." But Mom squeezed my hand under the table, her quiet strength urging me forward. I didn't know then that my path would lead to the FBI, or that I'd hide it from the family I longed to impress. All I knew was that I'd prove my worth, not as a Reid who ran toward danger, but as one who saw what others missed. That defiance, born in the shadow of my family's legacy, would carry me through years of secrecy, sacrifice, and a truth that would break open at the worst possible moment. By my senior year of high school, I'd set my sights on Georgetown University, drawn to its criminal justice program with a focus on forensic psychology. I wanted to understand the minds behind the crimes, to unravel the why that drove people to break the law. When the acceptance letter arrived, with a partial scholarship, I felt a surge of pride, my first step toward proving I could be more than the quiet, bookish daughter of Vernon Reid. But at our family dinner that spring, the air was thick with celebration for someone else. My brother, Gideon, had just been accepted to the police academy, and Dad raised his glass, his voice booming with pride. To Gideon, continuing the Reid tradition of real police work. Academy today, detective badge tomorrow. Everyone clinked glasses, their smiles wide, their eyes on Gideon. My news sat unspoken, a weight in my chest, until Mom gently prompted, "Sienna has news too." Dad glanced up, almost as an afterthought. "Georgetown, right? Good school." I tried to share my focus. Criminal justice, behavioral analysis. Maybe the FBI someday. He chuckled, the sound dismissive. "The FBI? Big dreams. Well, college is fine. You can always be a dispatcher or administrator if the fancy degree doesn't pan out. Support roles matter too." That moment crystallized my place in the Reid family. Gideon was the heir, the one who'd carry the badge, while I was the contingency plan, the one whose work would always be important to rather than essential. It hurt, but Gideon saw me differently. The night before I left for Georgetown, he pulled me aside, his voice low but warm. "They don't get it, Sienna. You're going to outrank us all. Just don't forget the little people when you're running the show." His faith was a lifeline, a reminder I could forge my own path. At Georgetown, I thrived, graduating with honors, my head full of theories about criminal behavior. But back home, my degree meant little without a badge to show for it. In a moment of weakness, or maybe calculation, I applied for a police dispatcher job in Eldridge. Dad's approval was immediate, the first time I'd felt his pride. "Practical," he said, nodding. "Good benefits, close to home. You'll learn how real police work functions from the inside." I smiled, but inside, I felt like I was betraying myself. For 2 years, I sat at that dispatch console, coordinating emergency calls, my training wasted on routine tasks. But in my spare time, I couldn't stop analyzing call patterns, mapping incidents no one asked for, chasing the puzzles that had always called to me. Those late-night analyses changed everything. One day, Lieutenant Granger called me into his office, holding a report I'd compiled, a detailed breakdown of drug-related calls showing distribution networks across county lines. "You did this?" he asked, his eyes wide. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "Just something I noticed." He shook his head. "This is what the Regional Task Force has been chasing for months." My report started circulating, reaching agencies beyond Eldridge. I was still just a dispatcher, but quietly, detectives began consulting me, asking for insights on patterns I'd spotted. One of those reports landed on a desk in the FBI's Philadelphia field office, and with it my name. On a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Sienna Reid? Agent Diana Foster, FBI. I'd like to discuss your analytical work over coffee. My heart pounded. Was this a test? A mistake? 2 days later, in a quiet cafe 20 miles from Eldridge, Agent Foster slid a folder across the table. Your education, combined with these analyses, is impressive, she said. Have you considered applying to the Bureau? 3 months later, I was accepted to the FBI Academy at Quantico. Holding that letter in my apartment, I faced a choice: tell my family the truth or keep it hidden to avoid Dad's inevitable skepticism. I chose the easier path. Over Sunday dinner, I said, I'm transferring to a federal dispatch position. Better pay, more responsibility. Dad nodded, his approval rare and fleeting. Government benefits are solid. Good move. Mom asked about vacation time for the 4th of July parade, more concerned with family than prestige. Gideon was the only one who congratulated me, his eyes sharp, like he sensed there was more. Proud of you, sis, he said. But as I left, Dad's parting words stung. At least Gideon's doing something important. Not everyone's cut out for the front lines. I smiled tightly, already mentally packing for Quantico. The training was grueling. Physical drills, tactical operations, behavioral analysis, but it felt right, like I'd found my place. I excelled, earning a spot in a counterterrorism unit focused on domestic threats with international ties, particularly the Sinaloa cartel. For 8 years, I built a career in the shadows, leading a team tracking cartel operations along the East Coast, while my family believed I was pushing papers in a federal office. Quantico wasn't all triumphs. Early on, I nearly broke. The physical training pushed me to my limits: sprints, obstacle courses, hand-to-hand combat. One night, after failing a fitness test, I sat in my dorm, ready to quit. My roommate, Agent Roland Pierce, found me staring at my unpacked bags. You're not here for push-ups, Reid, he said. Your mind sees what others miss. That's your badge. His words pulled me back, reminding me why I'd chosen this path. I doubled down, passing the tests, but my real strength was in the classroom, analyzing case studies, predicting criminal moves. By graduation, I was recruited for the cartel unit, my analyses already making waves. But every step forward meant another lie to my family. At holiday dinners, I dodged Dad's questions with vague talk of dispatch protocols. Mom would nod, satisfied. Dad would change the subject. Only Gideon seemed to notice the cracks in my story. One night, a year before he died, we met for drinks in Pittsburgh. I was in town for a case I couldn't discuss. Over beers, Gideon leaned in, his eyes narrowing. You're hiding something, sis. Federal dispatch, my ass. Spill it someday, okay? I laughed it off, but my heart raced. He was too sharp, too much like Dad in his ability to read people. Just boring government work, I said, sipping my drink. He smirked, unconvinced. You're gonna outrank me, Commander. I know it. His words were a joke, but they carried a truth he couldn't fully grasp. I wanted to tell him about Quantico, the cartel, the nights I spent mapping drug routes across states, but the classified nature of my work kept me silent. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about his latest case. He let it go, but that moment stayed with me. Gideon saw more than I realized, and it made the distance between us ache. Back at my apartment, I'd pore over cartel data, my laptop screen glowing in the dark, knowing my work was inching closer to the same networks Gideon was fighting on the streets. We were on parallel paths, but I couldn't tell him. That secrecy, that weight, defined my life for 8 years until the day it all came crashing down. It was 3:47 a.m. when my phone rang, the sound slicing through the silence of my DC apartment. I knew before I answered something was wrong. My mother's voice, usually so steady from years as a nurse, trembled on the other end. "Sienna," she said, barely above a whisper. "It's Gideon. He's gone." My heart stopped. Gone. Gideon, my brother, the one who'd always been larger than life, who wore his police badge like a second skin, was dead. A drug bust in Eldridge had gone wrong. A chaotic firefight with a Sinaloa cartel cell. He was shot, Mom said, her words breaking apart. They tried to save him, but he didn't make it. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hand, as she told me the details. A raid on a warehouse, bad intelligence, and ambush. My mind raced, piecing it together, and then the truth hit me like a punch. That raid, it was based on intelligence my FBI team had provided. I was a special agent in the counterterrorism unit, tracking the same cartel Gideon's task force was chasing. My reports, my analyses, had flagged that warehouse as a hub. I'd sent the data up the chain, thinking it would save lives, not end them. The guilt was immediate, a suffocating weight. Had my work led to this? Could I have seen something more, some detail that would have kept Gideon alive? I couldn't tell Mom, couldn't tell anyone. My FBI role was still a secret, buried under 8 years of lies about being a federal dispatcher. I booked the first flight to Eldridge, my mind a storm of grief and self-blame. When I landed, the town felt different. Smaller, colder, like it had lost its heartbeat. Our family home, once filled with Gideon's laughter, was a shell. Mom's eyes were red, her hands clutching a photo of Gideon in his dress blues. Dad, Vernon, was all business, organizing the memorial with the precision of the deputy chief he'd been. "It's what Gideon would have wanted," he said, his voice flat, avoiding my gaze. I tried to talk to him, to share the pain, but he cut me off. "Keep it brief at the service, Sienna. Gideon's real colleagues will handle the tributes." His words weren't cruel, just matter of fact, but they stung. To him, I was still the dispatcher, not a Reid who mattered in this moment of loss. I wanted to scream that I wasn't just a bystander, that my work had been part of Gideon's fight. But the weight of my secrecy, the classified nature of my job, kept me silent. I nodded, swallowing the hurt, and promised myself I'd honor Gideon in my own way. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying every report I'd written, every call I'd made. Had I missed something? Could I have saved him? The questions gnawed at me, relentless, as the reality of a world without Gideon sank in. The days before the memorial were a blur of grief and silence. Our house, once alive with Gideon's stories of busts and bar fights, felt like a museum to a life cut short. Mom was a shadow of herself, moving through routines like a ghost. She'd pause at the kitchen table, staring at Gideon's empty chair, her hands trembling as she folded napkins no one would use. I wanted to hold her, to tell her I understood, but my own guilt kept me at a distance. Dad was worse, distant, mechanical, his focus on the memorial program as if planning could erase the loss. He'd sit for hours, sorting photos of Gideon in uniform, choosing which ones to display at St. Mary's Cathedral. When I offered to help, he waved me off. "Stay in the background, Sienna," he said. His voice clipped. "This is about Gideon's service, not yours." I was listed in the program as surviving family, nothing more, my name tucked beneath officers who'd speak of his bravery. It felt like erasure, like I wasn't part of the legacy he died for. But there was something else, something I couldn't shake. The raid that killed Gideon wasn't just a tragedy, it was tied to my work. My FBI team had been tracking the Sinaloa cartel for years, mapping their routes, their safe houses. The warehouse in Eldridge was one-eyed flagged in a report 6 weeks earlier based on patterns in drug shipments. I'd sent the intelligence to the regional task force, never imagining Gideon would be on the ground when they acted. The details were hazy, bad communication, a rushed operation, but the outcome was clear. My brother was gone, and my work had played a role. I couldn't tell Dad, not when he saw me as irrelevant, not biblioteca, not when my cover was still intact. The guilt was a silent scream, tearing me apart as I prepared for the memorial, knowing I'd stand there as a fraud among Gideon's brothers in blue. The night before the memorial, I found myself in Gideon's old room, seeking some piece of him to hold on to. His childhood police badge sat on the dresser, small and scratched, a relic from his days dreaming of a job. I picked it up, and a memory hit me, Gideon at 12, pinning that badge on me, laughing as he saluted his deputy. We played cops and robbers in the backyard, him always the hero, me always the sidekick. "You'll get your turn, Sienna," he'd said, his grin wide. "You're tougher than you look." Holding that badge, I broke, tears falling for the brother who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I wanted to tell him everything, about the FBI, the cartel, the truth, but I'd waited too long, and now he was gone. Rummaging through his closet, I found a box of old case files, some marked with his neat handwriting. One folder caught my eye, labeled Task Force Notes. Inside was a single page, a list of drug busts, with my name circled in red ink next to the warehouse raid. A note in the margin read, "Sienna's onto something big. Check her leads." My breath caught. Gideon had suspected I was more than a dispatcher. He'd been piecing together my work, connecting dots I thought I'd hidden. A memory surfaced. A late-night call last year, Gideon asking about my federal dispatch job, his voice teasing but sharp. "You know more than you're saying, sis. I'm proud either way." I'd brushed it off, afraid to crack the wall of secrecy. Now, holding that note, I felt the weight of my silence. He'd seen me, even when I hid, and I'd never given him the chance to know the real me. Another memory came unbidden. We were kids, hiding in the attic, pretending to be detectives. Gideon had drawn a map of Eldridge, marking crime scenes with crayons. "You're the brains, Sienna," he'd said, handing me the map. "Figure out the bad guy's next move." I'd laughed, but even then he trusted my mind. That trust was in his note, in the files he'd kept, believing in me when Dad didn't. The guilt deepened. My secrecy had robbed us of a partnership we could have had. I clutched the folder, promising myself I'd honor him at the memorial, even if it meant standing in the shadows Dad assigned me. But I wasn't prepared for what was coming, for the moment my secret would shatter in front of everyone. The morning of Gideon's memorial, St. Mary's Cathedral in Eldridge was a sea of blue. Officers from across 3 states filled the pews, their dress uniforms pressed, badges polished, mourning bands stark against their sleeves. My brother's casket rested at the altar, draped in an American flag, a symbol of the sacrifice he'd made. I stood at the back, where my father, Vernon, had directed me, his words from the night before still echoing. "Stay out of the way, Sienna. This is about Gideon's service, not yours." I wore a black dress, my FBI badge tucked in my purse, a secret I'd carried for 8 years. To Dad, I was still the dispatcher, the daughter who'd never measure up to the Reid legacy of real police work. I nodded at his instruction, my heart heavy with grief and guilt, knowing my FBI intelligence had tied me to the raid that took Gideon's life. But standing there among officers who saw me as nothing more than surviving family, I felt invisible. The service began with a bagpipe's mournful wail, the notes piercing the silence. Captain Winters, Gideon's commander, took the podium first, his voice steady as he spoke of my brother's courage. "Gideon Reid was the best of us," he said, running toward danger when others would have turned back. I listened, my eyes fixed on the casket, remembering Gideon's laugh, his late-night stories of chasing suspects, his unshakable belief in the badge. My mother, Lenora, sat in the front row, clutching a tissue, her shoulders shaking. Dad sat beside her, his face a mask of stoic pride, the deputy chief who taught Gideon everything. I wanted to be up there, to speak for my brother, but Dad's program listed me only as surviving sister, my name buried beneath officers who'd share stories of his bravery. I swallowed the hurt, telling myself it was Gideon's day, not mine. Then, something shifted. As Detective Rodriguez, Gideon's partner, took the podium, I scanned the crowd, my FBI training kicking in. 3 men in dark coats stood near the side entrance, their postures too alert, their eyes darting across the officers. I recognized one from a surveillance photo, Antonio Varga, a low-level Sinaloa cartel associate. My pulse quickened. They weren't here to mourn. They were scouting, likely targeting the task force that had hit their warehouse. I slipped my phone from my purse, texting Agent Desmond Murray, my FBI contact. 3 suspects at Memorial. Varga confirmed. "Need backup." Rodriguez's voice broke through my focus, his words catching me off guard. Gideon was proud of his sister, Sienna, he said. He always said she had a mind sharper than any detective. I froze, the mention unexpected, a flicker of warmth in the cold weight of the day. But the danger in the room pulled me back, my eyes locked on the suspects, waiting for Desmond's response. The cathedral doors swung open mid-eulogy, and 3 FBI agents in dark suits strode in, their presence cutting through the solemn air like a blade. Agent Desmond Murray led them, his voice firm and urgent. "Agent Reid, we need you now." The words echoed, silencing the crowd. Every head turned, officers' faces a mix of confusion and shock. My father's eyes found me, his jaw tightening, disbelief etched in his features. For 8 years, I'd been Sienna, the dispatcher, the one who didn't belong in the Reid legacy of badges and bravery. Now, the truth was out, and it landed like a grenade. I stepped forward, my legs steady despite the pounding in my chest, and met Desmond at the aisle. "What's the situation?" I asked, my voice low but professional. "Varga and 2 others," he whispered. "They're scoping the task force. We need to detain them quietly." I glanced at the suspects, still near the side entrance, unaware they'd been spotted. My training took over, pushing grief and guilt to the back of my mind. I approached Captain Winters, who stood near the altar, his brow furrowed. "Captain," I said, my voice steady, "I'm Special Agent Sienna Reid, FBI. Those men by the door are cartel associates, likely here to identify task force members. I've got a team ready to extract them, but we need your help to avoid a scene." Winters blinked, processing my words, then nodded, his respect immediate. "What do you need?" he asked. I laid out the plan. His officers would block the exits while my team moved in, ensuring no one got hurt. Winters signaled 2 lieutenants, who fanned out discreetly, their hands on their radios. Desmond's team positioned themselves, blending into the crowd, their movements precise. As we coordinated, I felt Dad's eyes on me, his stoic mask cracking. Officers whispered, their glances shifting from confusion to recognition. "That's Vernon's daughter," one murmured. "She's FBI." The weight of their stares was heavy, but I focused on the task. We couldn't let Varga slip away, not here, not at Gideon's memorial. I gave Desmond the signal, and his team moved, swift and silent, approaching the suspects. One tried to bolt, but an officer blocked the door, and within moments, all 3 were detained, escorted out through a side exit. The congregation barely noticed, the eulogies continuing, but the air in the cathedral had changed. I wasn't just Gideon's sister anymore. I was Agent Reid, and for the first time, I stood in the light of my own truth. Dad's face, pale and unreadable, told me he was grappling with a reality he'd never imagined. This wasn't how I'd wanted him to find out, but there was no going back now. For a moment, I hesitated, the weight of Dad's stare pulling me back to every dismissal, every time he called me less than a Reid. I was 10 again, hearing, "Analysis isn't policing, Sienna. Stick to something safe." I was 15, watching him toast Gideon's future while my dreams were brushed aside. But then a memory surfaced, sharp and steadying. I was 16, training with Gideon in our backyard, him teaching me to stay calm under pressure. "Breathe, sis," he'd said, dodging my clumsy punches. "You've got this. You're tougher than you know." His voice was in my head now, pushing me forward. I wasn't just the quiet daughter anymore. I was Agent Reid, and there was a job to do. I turned to Desmond, my resolve hardening. "Let's wrap this up," I said, my voice firm. We finalized the extraction, ensuring Varga and his associates were secured without disrupting the service. Captain Winters shook my hand, his grip strong. "Good work, Agent Reid," he said, and the words felt like a badge I'd earned. As the suspects were led away, I caught a glimpse of Dad, his hands trembling, a rare crack in the stoic deputy chief I'd always known. An officer nearby, one of Gideon's old partners, leaned toward him and whispered, "Your daughter's a badass, Vernon." Who knew? Dad didn't respond, but his eyes stayed on me, searching, as if seeing me for the first time. I wanted to go to him, to explain, but there was no time. The service continued, and I returned to my place at the back, my role in the operation complete. Standing there, I felt the weight of 8 years lift, replaced by a new kind of burden. Gideon's memorial was meant to honor his sacrifice, but it had become the stage for my truth. I thought of the note I'd found in his room, his handwriting circling my name next to the warehouse Reid. Sienna's onto something big. He'd known, or at least suspected, that I was more than a dispatcher. He believed in me, even when I hid from him. That belief gave me strength now, a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for the brother who'd seen me when no one else did. As the bagpipes played again, signaling the end of the service, I made a silent promise to Gideon. I'd carry his legacy, not just as a Reid, but as an agent who'd make a difference, no matter who saw it. Dad's shock, the officer's respect, it all meant something, but it was Gideon's faith that kept me standing, ready to face whatever came next. The memorial was over, but the weight of that day lingered like a storm that wouldn't break. The cathedral had emptied, officers dispersing into the gray Eldridge afternoon, their murmured condolences fading with them. I stood outside, my breath visible in the cold, still reeling from the moment Agent Murray called me out. "Agent Reid, we need you now." My secret was out, my 8 years as an FBI agent laid bare before my father, Vernon, and a room full of Gideon's brothers in blue. I'd expected anger or disbelief from Dad, but he'd been silent, his face unreadable as we drove home. That silence followed us into the living room, where Mom, Lenora, sat staring at a photo of Gideon, her eyes hollow with grief. I thought the day's shocks were done, but Dad broke the quiet, his voice low and unsteady. "Sienna, there's something you need to see," he said, holding out a small envelope and a USB drive. "Gideon left this for us. I found it in his desk this morning." My hands trembled as I took the envelope, my brother's handwriting staring back at me. For Dad and Sienna. Inside was a letter, folded carefully, dated 6 months before his death. I read it aloud, my voice catching on every word. "Dad, Sienna's not who you think," Gideon wrote. "She's a badass FBI agent, working cases bigger than anything we've seen in Eldridge. I've known for a while, pieced it together from her dispatch, stories that didn't add up. I've collected proof, news articles, commendations, things she'd never tell you herself. She's one of us, Dad, even if she doesn't wear the uniform. Show her this when the time's right." Tears blurred my vision as I read, Gideon's voice echoing in my head. He'd known. All those years I hid my truth, afraid of Dad's judgment. Gideon had seen through the lie. He'd been proud, not threatened, by the path I'd chosen. Dad handed me the USB, his hands as unsteady as mine. "There's a video," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We plugged it into his old laptop, and there was Gideon, alive on the screen, sitting in his precinct office, his badge pinned to his chest. "Dad, Sienna," he said, his smile warm but serious. "If you're watching this, something's probably gone wrong. I've been working with the task force, chasing the same bad guy Sienna's after. Her work, it's real law enforcement, Dad, the kind that saves lives before the fight even starts. Don't let her tell you otherwise." He leaned closer, his eyes bright. "Sienna, you're the smartest Reid I know. Keep fighting. And Dad, trust her. She's earned it." The video ended, and the room was silent, the weight of Gideon's words settling over us like a heavy blanket. Dad looked at me, his eyes wet, and said, "I was wrong about you, Sienna. All these years, I was so damn wrong." That moment cracked something open in our family, a wound we'd all carried but never named. Mom stood, crossing the room to pull me into a hug, her arms tight as if she could hold back the grief. "Gideon knew you were special," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He always did." I clung to her, the tears I'd held back all day spilling over. For so long, I'd felt like an outsider in my own family, the Reid who didn't fit the mold. But Gideon's letter, his video, his unshakable belief in me, it was like he'd reached across the divide of his death to pull me back. Mom stepped back, wiping her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her not just as the nurse who'd patched up Dad's injuries, but as the woman who'd quietly held us together through every storm. Dad was still seated, the USB drive in his hand, his gaze fixed on the blank laptop screen. 8 years, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. 8 years, and I never suspected. I thought you were safe, behind a desk, not out there doing what you do. There was no anger, just a quiet reckoning, like he was seeing me for the first time. Officers had approached me after the memorial, their handshakes firm, their words laced with respect. Didn't know you were one of us, Reid. That shift had rattled Dad, his worldview built on badges and street work crumbling under the truth of my career. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. I want to know what you can share about your work, Sienna, he said. Within your rules, of course. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was a bridge, a step toward understanding. I nodded, promising myself I'd open that door, little by little, to let him in. Gideon's gift had given us a chance to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be a Reid, and I wasn't going to waste it. Later that night, Dad and I sat on the porch, the USB drive playing again on his tablet. Fireflies blinked in the yard, their soft glow mirroring the quiet hope between us. Gideon's voice filled the air, steady and warm. Dad, Sienna's saving lives, just like us. Her work stops the bad guys before they hit the streets. I remembered a night years ago when Gideon caught me analyzing a case file at 2 a.m. in our old house. I'd been mapping drug routes, my laptop glowing in the dark, thinking I was alone. He'd leaned over my shoulder, his voice teasing but proud. You're gonna outrank me, Commander, he'd said, winking. Just don't tell Dad I'm slacking. I'd laughed, brushing him off, but now, hearing his voice on the video, that memory felt like a lifeline. He'd seen me, even then, and he kept my secret, believing I'd find my moment. Dad paused the video, his eyes distant. He saw you before I did, he said, his voice thick. All those years, I thought I knew what a Reid should be. I was wrong. It was the closest he'd come to admitting his mistake, and it was enough. We sat in silence, watching the fireflies, the weight of Gideon's absence heavy but softened by his gift. Another memory surfaced. Gideon and I as kids, sneaking into the attic to play detectives, him drawing crime scenes with crayons, me plotting the bad guy's next move. You're the brains, Sienna, he'd said, handing me the map. That trust, that belief, was in every word of his letter, every frame of his video. It was his way of telling me to keep going, to carry our legacy in my own way. I looked at Dad, his hand still holding the tablet, and felt something shift. We weren't healed, not completely, but we were starting. Gideon's death had torn us apart, but his final act was pulling us back together. I'd returned to my FBI work, chasing the cartel, honoring my brother with every case I closed. And Dad, he'd started calling, asking about my day, careful not to push past what I could share. We were learning to see each other, to build a new kind of Reid legacy, one where analysis was as vital as action. Gideon's voice, his faith, would guide us, a beacon in the dark, reminding us that family isn't about who wears the badge, but who carries the fight. Gideon's death broke my world, shattering the foundation I'd built over years of secrecy and striving. Losing him was like losing a piece of myself, the brother who'd teased me, believed in me, seen me when I felt invisible. Standing in that cathedral, hearing Agent Reid called out, I stepped into a truth I'd hidden for 8 years, but it came at a cost. My father, Vernon, had to face his own failure to see me, and I had to face the guilt of my work's role in Gideon's final case. But in the quiet that followed, in the letter and video Gideon left behind, I found something else, a way forward. His words, his faith, were a lifeline, pulling me through the grief to a place where I could keep fighting. He'd known I was an FBI agent, piecing together my secret with the same sharp instinct that made him a great cop. That knowledge, his pride in me, became my anchor. I returned to my work with the FBI, chasing the Sinaloa cartel with a renewed sense of purpose. Every case I closed, every lead I followed, was for Gideon, for the brother who'd called me Commander with a wink, who trusted me to carry our family's legacy in my own way. Back in Eldridge, my parents were learning to see me differently. Mom, Lenora, would call to check in, her voice softer now, asking about my day without pressing for details I couldn't share. Dad was the biggest change. The man who'd once dismissed me as just a dispatcher now called weekly, his questions careful but curious. "Anything you can tell me about your cases, Sienna?" He'd listen, really listen, as I shared what I could within the limits of classification. It wasn't perfect, grief doesn't vanish, and trust takes time, but it was a start. We were rebuilding, redefining what it meant to be a Reid. Service, I've learned, isn't about the badge you wear or the title you carry. It's about the impact you make, the lives you touch, even when no one sees. Gideon taught me that, not just in his life, but in the gift he left behind. His letter, his video, reminded me that our legacy isn't bound by tradition. It's built by those who dare to fight in whatever way they can. I carry him with me in every step I take as Agent Reid, knowing he's watching, still proud, still my brother. And as I move forward, I'm not just fighting for myself or my family, but for everyone who's ever felt unseen, who's ever had to prove their worth in the shadows. If you've ever felt invisible, like your work, your passion, your truth was overlooked by the people who matter most, you're not alone. For 8 years, I hid who I was, not just from my family, but from myself, afraid I'd never measure up to the Reid name. Gideon's death, his memorial, the moment my secret broke free, it changed everything. It taught me that our worth isn't in what others see, but in what we do, day after day, even when it's hard. I want to hear your story. Have you ever been underestimated, your strength dismissed until you prove them wrong? Drop it in the comments below. Your words could lift someone else who's feeling unseen right now. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps share this journey with others who need to hear it. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what's next. More stories of courage, of truth, of finding your place. Share this video with someone who's been overlooked, someone who needs to know their fight matters. I used Grok, created by XAI, to help shape the story, to bring clarity to a life full of secrets and loss. It's a tool that helps make sense of the chaos, and it's part of why I'm here, sharing this with you. Check it out at XAI's website. There's a link in the description. Let's keep this conversation alive. Where are you watching from? What's your story of being underestimated? Comment below, and let's honor the strength it takes to stand in your truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for hearing Gideon's story, my story, our family story. It's not over. There's more to share about how I became an FBI agent, about the cases I've worked, and the lessons I've learned from loss. Stick around for those stories by subscribing now. Hit that button and tap the bell so you're the first to know when they drop. Check out my next video, How I Became an FBI Agent, where I'll take you behind the scenes of Quantico and the choices that led me here. Or dive into Gideon's last case, a deeper look at the raid that changed everything and how his legacy lives on. Both are linked right here, so click to keep watching. If you haven't shared your story yet, do it now. Scroll down and tell me, when did you prove someone wrong about you? Where are you watching from? Your comments build this community, so let's hear your voice. I'm grateful for tools like Grok from XAI, which helped me organize the story and bring it to you with clarity and heart. If you're curious about how it works, visit XAI's website. The link's in the description. This isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's ever fought to be seen. Share this video with someone who needs that reminder, someone who's carving their own path. Let's keep telling stories that matter, stories that lift us up. Thank you for being here, for listening, for sharing this moment. Keep watching, keep commenting, and let's carry Gideon's light together.